Hello, everybody. It's me, Sports Talk Guy. And in this episode, we're here to talk about the NFL franchise tag, or lack thereof. Now, you're probably wondering, maybe you're wondering, I don't know, maybe you already know, you probably already know, what is a franchise tag? A franchise tag in the NFL, and it's only in the NFL, the only major sport that does this, is where you could place this franchise tag onto a player and you have to pay them the league average of their position for 1 year. And now you're probably thinking, oh, well, that's cool. You could probably do that every year to some guys. Not quite. There's different kinds of franchise tags, and it's a long explanation, and a lot of guys who get tagged aren't happy about it, and they hold out until they get a new contract. But this year, teams didn't even bother giving out the franchise tag to some of their players. They just said screw it and all, so they didn't have to deal with some of the crap. Now, Jarius Byrd, Aqib Talib, TJ Ward, Altron Werner, 5 studs, did not get tagged by their teams and are heading into free agency, all hot commodities. And then there's Jimmy Graham, who I think I said, and if I didn't, that'd be crazy. Jimmy Graham got a special type of franchise tag. I forget what it's called specifically, but what happens is with Jimmy Graham, he still goes into free agency, but if a team decides to sign him, they have to give up 2 first-round draft picks. And what I've been seeing a lot is that a lot of people are saying, oh, well, who's going to do that? Who's going to want to sign Jimmy Graham for that? And the Saints will just re-sign him. They won't have to give up any picks. No one's going to vouch for it. Not quite. There's a couple teams in my mind who easily don't care about giving up draft picks in order to get Jimmy Graham. And now I guess I'll go in order from least greatest to greatest teams. So the number 3 team who I think Jimmy Graham will go to, that's not the Saints. This isn't the Saints. The number 3 team that I think Jimmy Graham will go to is the St. Louis Rams. The Rams, about 2 years ago now, it'll be about, actually it's 30 year very soon, got 3 draft picks 3 years in a row from the Washington Redskins in order for the Redskins to be able to obtain Robert Griffin III. Not Robert Griffin, but the Rams now have the 2nd round pick of this year's draft, and I think the 10th, or somewhere between 10 and 12, they also have that pick in there, because the Redskins don't have a 1st round pick. And now what would happen was, when you sign a player that has a special tag on them, you give up your 2 most recent, or 2 most upcoming draft picks, so it would be both their picks this year. Why would they care? They're a young team. They already have a quarterback. They have a very good receiver who's going to be a top receiver in about 2 years in Tavon Austin. Your defense is stacked out its mind. Now you get Jimmy Graham with a healthy Sam Bradford. You have the best tight end in the game, a quarterback who's coming in with one of the premier receivers coming into the league, and they have a top running back with Zach Stacy, and their offensive line is pretty strong. It's definitely above average. That offense definitely becomes a contender, and that makes that NFC West even stronger. Now, on to another team who might do it. While I think this team is probably a little bit less likely than the Rams, there's been more talks about this team and the team coming up that definitely have shown interest already. And number 2 is the Green Bay Packers. The Packers have shown interest, and now you're probably thinking with the Packers, well, how do they afford a guy like Jimmy Graham? They have guys like Aaron Rodgers. They have the receiving core. You have I shouldn't say that, but you have Clay Matthews. You have all those guys. How are they going to be able to afford them? Well, it's simple. They do have a lot of cap space, the Packers. Now, granted, the cap space they have, they could easily get Jimmy Graham. There's no doubt in my mind. And do they care about giving up 2 draft picks? Of course not. They're a top team that doesn't have to worry about their 1st round picks. They're a young team, too. The difference is, do you want to take Jimmy Graham, or do you want to go after a top defensive player? Because they certainly need defense. That is the number 1 key to the Packers. Their defense is awful. The only guy that played even slightly good this year, I shouldn't say slightly. One of the only guys that played slightly good this year was Clay Matthews, but he was hurt, and Sam Shields, but he's on the free agency because the Packers also didn't pick him up. That's another player I forgot to add in that list of great players that are heading into free agency. So yeah, and the Packers definitely can do it. I think they have the 20th or 21st pick of the draft this year, and then I don't think they have another first round pick this year, so it'll go into next year. Excuse me, but I expect them to dominate the North this year. But there's certainly a lot of factors that can change that. Excuse me. And now on to the number one team, and you guys might think I'm crazy, but after I explain it, it'll all make sense. The number one team, your Super Bowl 48 champions, the Seattle Seahawks. And you're probably all thinking, how the hell do the Seahawks afford a guy like Jimmy Graham with Russell Wilson, Percy Harvin, Marshawn Lynch, Golden Tate, Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, all those guys? How do they afford Jimmy Graham? Simple. Russell Wilson, Richard Sherman, and Earl Thomas are all still in their rookie contracts, which means I think between the three of them, Earl Thomas is the only one even making $1 million, and I know Richard Sherman and Russell Wilson aren't making $1 million a year, and that's a lot of cap space. And with the way everything's going, they'd have enough cap space. Now, Jimmy Graham wouldn't be long-term, like the Packers or the Rams. They could sign him long-term. The Seahawks could get him for 2 years, but imagine those 2 years in Seattle. You now just added, you have a top 5 running back. When healthy, you have a top 10 receiver. You have the number 1 tight end in the NFL with the best defensive core in the NFL with the best cornerback. That team just gets even more dangerous. And now the Seahawks look almost unstoppable, and you just give Russell Wilson another weapon. That's insane. And that's why I was surprised. And now I saw a lot of Saints fans, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of fan bases in the NFL I don't like. And I'm sorry, Saints fans, you're one of them because you're very biased fan base. Don't take it offensively. I have friends who are Saints fans, and just don't take it wrong. But they're very, as a whole, they're a very biased fan base. And I saw a lot of Saints fans especially going, oh, well, of course he's not going to leave. Why would he leave? Listen, Saints, if Jimmy Graham decides he wants to leave New Orleans, you can kiss winning that division next year goodbye, because that's all the Panthers now. The Saints are another team, and going back to my last video about the Broncos, they're another team who didn't impress me. Their receiving core isn't that good anymore. Colston didn't look good. He's supposed to be the leader, and everyone else behind him was just awful. And their running back core also didn't impress at all. Thank God for Drew Brees in that defense, or that team would be atrocious. But now you get rid of the best tight end in the NFL. Yeah. And if I had to say, there's a feeling in me that Jimmy Graham isn't coming back to the Saints. I'm sorry to say that. Maybe they should have tagged him. Say, hey, if he holds out, like give him the type of franchise tag that makes him stay for a year. And they say, oh, well, screw if he holds out. We'll give him his contract sometime in the next 5-6 months. You have all that time to work out a new deal, whether he likes it or not. But the Saints, I guess, weren't thinking. I guess they thought, oh, well, if we give him this type of tag, 2 first-round draft picks, either both this year or one this year and one next year, no one's going to want to take them. That's not going to be the case. I promise you, someone will go after Jimmy Graham, and it's most likely going to be one of the 3 teams I said. There's a few other team names I've thrown around. I've also heard the Browns, which is also very possible. I've also heard the Dolphins. But those 2 teams, in my mind, are a little less unlikely, or a little more unlikely, I should say, to sign him. And now with these other players, like Jarius Byrd, TJ Ward, Aqib Talib, Jarius Byrd, if not already, is a top 5 safety. And if he's not already to you, he will be in the next 2 years at least, or at most, it'll take him. Aqib Talib is a top 5 corner. He's behind Richard Sherman, Darrelle Revis, and Patrick Peterson. In my mind, he's 4th. That's very good, because there's 2 corners on each team. He's very good. And TJ Ward is a top 10 safety. Probably about 7th or 8th. Probably even higher, actually, now that I think about it. He's probably maybe even 5th. Now that I think about it. And these guys aren't getting tagged, and I'm thinking, you teams are crazy. Listen, and these teams that all gave up all these players, I don't know. And I guess the Bills, they were talking about franchise tagging Bird and then trading him because Bird doesn't want to be on the Bills. He doesn't want to play for the Bills. That's already known. Although, even though TJ Ward's available now, and as an Eagles fan, I know for a fact that they're signing Jairus Byrd or TJ Ward, like there's no doubt in my mind. But I kind of want to see the Eagles get Jairus Byrd and then have TJ Ward go back to the Browns because I think, I've said this before in a previous video, the Browns are just this close to dominating that division. They are this close. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope I educated you a little bit about franchise tags and where some of the top players might end up in this year's free agency, which starts on March 11th. Thank you so much for watching.